Have you ever felt that the more deeply you think, the more isolated you become? That heightened understanding leads not to connection, but to distance. Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century philosopher renowned for his unflinching realism, believed that intelligence is not merely a gift, but often a burden. In his view, society doesn't just misunderstand the intelligent, it fears them. Schopenhauer observed that profound intellect often mirrors the limitations of others, making them uncomfortable. This discomfort isn't due to any wrongdoing by the intelligent individual, but arises from an unconscious recognition of one's own shortcomings. As a result, society tends to sideline those who challenge its comfort zones, favoring conformity over depth. In a bustling financial firm nestled in the heart of a global city, Ion had always been the quiet observer in meetings. A top performer with degrees from elite institutions, his ideas consistently outshone those of his peers. But over time, Ion noticed something strange. His proposals were increasingly ignored, his insights dismissed with casual shrugs or veiled sarcasm. Colleagues who once admired him now seemed threatened. He had never been one to court attention or play office politics. Instead, he focused on the data, often uncovering risks months before they became evident to others. When he warned the board about an over-leveraged investment that others championed, he was labeled negative and too academic. Months later, the losses came. Silence followed. Rather than admitting his foresight, the firm quietly shifted blame. Ion became further isolated, subtly excluded from key meetings, despite being more competent than ever. His precision wasn't appreciated. It was perceived as arrogance. People preferred confident mediocrity to uncomfortable truth. Schopenhauer would have seen Ion's fate as inevitable. In a world where shallow thinking dominates, depth becomes a mirror, one that others would rather smash than look into. Intelligence in this case wasn't a gift, but a quiet curse that sparked subconscious envy. The intelligent don't merely pose a cognitive challenge, they unsettle emotional hierarchies. Ion wasn't disliked for being wrong. He was disliked for being right, too often, without the social finesse to make others feel secure in his presence. His intellect became a silent indictment of others' complacency. This scenario illustrates Schopenhauer's view that intelligent individuals are often pushed to the periphery, not due to failure, but precisely because they succeed on terms society doesn't control. Their standards come from within, making them unpredictable and, therefore, unmanageable. Eventually, Ion resigned, not in bitterness, but in quiet clarity. He chose to consult independently, thriving in solitude, where his insights were sought after, not suppressed. He stopped trying to fit in where he was never meant to. In the end, society didn't push him out because he failed, but because he saw too much and spoke too plainly. In doing so, he committed the silent sin of being smarter than his environment allowed. Lena was a literature major at a prestigious university. Unlike many of her peers who echoed lectures and repeated accepted theories, she questioned everything. Why were some authors canonized while others forgotten? Why were contrarian thinkers always labeled as problematic? At first, her professors appreciated her curiosity, but when her essays began critiquing the foundational assumptions of entire syllabi, admiration turned to irritation. "You're missing the point," one professor told her. "You need to stay within the academic framework." But Lena refused to play along. Her classmates began to treat her differently too. Her nuanced thoughts made others feel simplistic, even if she didn't intend to. When she spoke in seminars, discussions fell silent. She wasn't trying to dominate. She just thought faster, deeper. That became her social liability. Schopenhauer believed that true intelligence seeks truth, even if it means challenging every convention. But society, especially in institutions, often punishes those who veer too far from the consensus. Lena's mind wasn't dangerous because it was offensive. It was dangerous because it was free. People don't fear stupidity. They fear difference. Lena's questions threatened the collective intellectual comfort. In group dynamics, fitting in often trumps being right. So instead of being celebrated, Lena became the eccentric. Too intense, too much. Her loneliness deepened. The social world of the university no longer felt inviting. She immersed herself in solitary reading, writing with raw honesty about the paradox of being too thoughtful in a world that rewards the agreeable. She started publishing essays anonymously online. To her surprise, her work resonated deeply with readers outside the academic world. People craving intellectual honesty found in Lena the clarity they themselves lacked words for. This became her path forward. Like many thinkers Schopenhauer admired, Lena realized that solitude wasn't exile. It was liberation. The world may shun the deeply intelligent, but it cannot silence them, especially when they learn to create from the margins. In a small lab behind his home, Marcus was building something he believed could revolutionize energy storage. A self-taught engineer with a background in physics, he had devised a prototype battery that was cheaper, longer-lasting, and far more sustainable than anything on the market. He approached investors. Most didn't understand his diagrams. A few dismissed him outright. If this worked, one said, someone smarter than you would have done it already. Another scoffed. You're not even backed by a university. Every meeting was a reminder that society values credentials over capability. Marcus wasn't discouraged, only more resolved. He wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to improve the world. But the more sophisticated his pitch became, the less people listened. It was as if clarity made them suspicious. As Schopenhauer wrote, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Eventually, a small startup in Europe took a risk. They built his design. It worked. Over the next 2 years, Marcus's invention transformed battery production in an entire sector. Yet, he still wasn't fully welcomed into the scientific establishment. Why? Because his presence exposed the lie. That innovation doesn't always come from elite institutions. That intellect doesn't need permission to be real. His work embarrassed an industry built more on politics than progress. Schopenhauer argued that genius repels because it disrupts the comforting illusion that power and intelligence always go hand in hand. Marcus had no desire to dominate, just to contribute. But society doesn't trust those it cannot domesticate. Over time, his success brought recognition. But even then, it was laced with envy. Marcus learned what many brilliant minds do, that being intelligent is not enough. You must also be diplomatic, unless you're ready to be feared, not followed. At a high society gathering in Vienna, Amelia was introduced as a philosophy professor. Within minutes, her sharp mind drew interest and then discomfort. She listened more than she spoke, but when she did, her observations cut through superficial chatter like a scalpel. Someone joked about politics. Amelia responded with a comment about the cycle of populism and Plato's warnings in the Republic. The room fell quiet. She hadn't raised her voice or criticized anyone, but she had broken an unspoken rule. Don't make people think too hard at social events. As the night went on, conversations drifted away from her. People smiled politely, then turned to easier company. She understood. It wasn't personal. It was cognitive self-defense. Her presence was like a mirror, too clear for comfort. Schopenhauer believed intelligent people crave depth, while most of society drowns in surface. Amelia wasn't trying to be intimidating, but her intelligence wasn't something she could shut off. It was how she saw the world. And that was what made others uneasy. She stayed until dessert, then quietly left. On the walk home, she wasn't angry, just reminded of her place in the social hierarchy. The brilliant are rarely invited to lead conversations. They are feared as judges in rooms where no one asked to be evaluated. But Amelia didn't judge. She simply saw more. And seeing more means speaking less, because most people aren't ready to hear what intelligent minds want to say. Schopenhauer himself often chose solitude for this very reason. That night, Emilia wrote in her journal, "The punishment of lucidity is loneliness. But I would rather be alone, with clarity, than surrounded by illusions." And with that, she reclaimed her mind, not as a curse, but a calling. In a city celebrated for its avant-garde galleries and performative progressiveness, Camille was an enigma, a visual artist whose work interrogated the very foundations of cultural aesthetics. She was both praised and quietly resisted. Her pieces didn't flatter the public or cater to trends. They confronted, questioned, unsettled. At one major exhibition, her installation portrayed a fragmented mirror surrounded by quotes from forgotten female philosophers. Critics didn't know how to categorize it. Some called it too academic. Others said it lacked emotional relatability. But those who stayed with it long enough felt its haunting genius. It forced them to see themselves, not as they appeared, but as they thought. An uncomfortable exercise. Camille noticed that, despite growing accolades abroad, she was being sidelined locally. She didn't attend the right parties. She didn't feign humility or explain her work in palatable sound bites. Like Schopenhauer, she believed that true art should elevate, not appease. But the art world, like any world, is driven by clicks and comfort. The deeper her ideas, the more they were resisted. It wasn't talent they feared, but the clarity that her work demanded from its viewers. It didn't allow ignorance to remain unchallenged. In an industry that rewards marketable ambiguity, Camille's precision became a threat. She realized her intelligence had alienated her, not through arrogance, but through independence. People were not opposed to thinking. They were opposed to thinking outside familiar frames. And Camille refused to frame her brilliance in terms the insecure could digest. Eventually, a museum in Berlin offered her a solo retrospective. It became a turning point. There, she found curators who didn't fear intellectual rigor, who celebrated her refusal to dilute her vision. Her ideas finally met the minds prepared for them. Camille became a living testament to Schopenhauer's principle that true depth is often first shunned, then celebrated, but never understood by the masses. Her work was not for everyone. It was for those brave enough to see. Dr. Rafik was a tenured researcher at a top medical institute. Charismatic, meticulous, and forward-thinking, he should have been a darling of the establishment. But he had one fatal flaw. He kept asking questions that no one wanted answered. He questioned pharmaceutical incentives. He published data suggesting alternative therapies were being ignored due to funding biases. His work was peer-reviewed, scientifically sound, and yet politically dangerous. Grants disappeared. Speaking invitations dried up. Colleagues distanced themselves. Schopenhauer would have nodded knowingly. Society often praises science until science threatens its economic structures. Intelligence, when applied honestly, can become incendiary, not because it's wrong, but because it's too right. Dr. Rafik's real crime wasn't fraud, misconduct, or incompetence. It was clarity. He didn't peddle narratives. He exposed them. In a world comfortable with profitable illusions, he brought uncomfortable facts. He eventually shifted to independent research, funded through global health NGOs. Free from institutional pressure, he thrived. His papers, though now outside mainstream journals, were devoured by thinkers across disciplines. He became a thought leader, precisely because he stopped needing permission to think. This scenario captures a timeless truth. Society wants intelligent people to fix its problems, but not to question its systems. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a solitary path for this reason. Rafik walked it with grace. In time, institutions circled back, attempting to realign with his now globally respected research. But he no longer needed validation. He had found a higher loyalty, truth. From a young age, Nico was different. He didn't speak much, but his eyes were always scanning. Teachers noticed he absorbed lessons far beyond his grade level. Other children, sensing his strangeness, called him robot, weird, or worse. At home, Nico asked questions that left his parents stunned. Why do grown-ups lie so much? If rules keep changing, are they really rules? His observations weren't disrespectful. They were simply raw. Schopenhauer would have described Nico as a natural-born philosopher, condemned to loneliness by the very clarity of his mind. In school, he was placed in advanced programs, but even there, he felt disconnected. Not because of difficulty, but because the others were playing a game he never understood. Pretend. Pretend not to notice hypocrisy. Pretend mediocrity is effort. Pretend popularity is wisdom. Adults often found him unnerving. He didn't react the way children were expected to. He didn't need to be taught to think. He needed to be allowed to. But society isn't built for children like Nico. It rewards compliance, not contemplation. He found solace in books. Not just stories, but philosophy, logic, systems. Schopenhauer became a silent mentor through the pages. Nico began to understand that his mind wasn't broken. It was merely tuned to a different frequency. Years later, Nico would channel this clarity into innovation. But the boy who once frightened others with his stillness and questions never forgot how deeply society resists those who see too much, too early. Intelligence, he realized, often feels like exile in childhood, and yet it was in that exile that he found his identity, not as a misfit, but as a mirror society couldn't bear to look into for too long. Schopenhauer once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." It's a cruel irony. Those who see deeply into life are also those who feel the weight of it most. Intelligence, in its purest form, isn't about acquiring knowledge or reciting facts. It's a lens that penetrates illusion, a torch that reveals the dark corners society would rather leave in shadow. In every scenario, from the corporate renegade to the misunderstood child, one truth stands firm. Society is not built to support intelligence, but to contain it. It rewards conformity, rewards those who don't question the system, but rather function within it. True intelligence, it disrupts, it doubts, it sees what others miss, and that is terrifying to a world dependent on stability and control. The intelligent are rarely embraced in their time. They are too ahead, too honest, too aware. Their silence is mistaken for arrogance, their insight for madness. But history has shown again and again, today's heretic is tomorrow's prophet. Schopenhauer didn't merely pity the fate of the intelligent, he understood it. To be brilliant is to be lonely, not because one chooses isolation, but because few are capable of walking the same inner roads. Genius, when it manifests, often does so in silence, in exile from the very world it could elevate, if only it were ready. And so, if you find yourself misunderstood, feared, or dismissed, not for cruelty, but for clarity, remember this: you are not broken. You are simply out of phase with a world still learning to listen. Let them fear you. Let them mock what they cannot comprehend, because intelligence is not a gift to be popular. It is a fire to be guarded, a burden, and, in the right hands, a revolution.